Okay, so this is Grandma Hill.
No, it's Grandma Challen Fay Hill.
She's going to tell us a little bit about where she grew up in her life, up to now. It's September of 2000, so you're 10 months old now. And why don't we start? Where were you born and where did you grow up? And tell us some good stories about your early childhood.
Well, I was born in DeKalb,
Illinois?
Illinois, and I was taken home to South 7th Street and to a house that my father had built, Mom and Dad. And then we moved to the farm, North Shabna, 160 or 80 acres, I'm not sure what it was.
Where was that at?
North of Shabna.
On Perry Road?
No, it's on Lee Road. And when we moved in there, birds were flying through from one wall to the other.
Through the house?
Through the house. And that first winter, when we'd wake up in the morning, we'd have a foot-high snowdrift in our bedroom. We'd have to go down by the stove to get dressed, to get warm.
Sounds pretty cold.
It was cold. We lived there until I was in 5th grade, and the folks had bought another farm right on the city limits of Shabna.
Is that house still standing now?
Yep, North Illini. The one on the farm's still there.
Is it?
Yeah.
Really?
And then they took a year to remodel that house, and we moved in there and lived there until I graduated from high school. And then I went to beauty school. Graduated from beauty school in 1963. Graduated from high school in 1963. And I started my own shop then in 1964. In my folks' house. I worked at the bank.
You worked at the bank full time?
I worked at the bank full time, and I worked in my beauty shop nights and weekends.
And how long did that go on?
That went on for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I quit the bank and I went to Wurlitzer. Worked at Wurlitzer. Worked in the traffic department. I worked in accounting department.
All right. Looking good?
Looking good. And then in 1969, I married Terry Fay.
1969 or 1968?
68.
68.
So I had my beauty shop and worked for 5 years before I got married. And then I had
Where'd you meet him?
child, Dan. Huh?
Where'd you meet him?
In Shabna. He was a bread salesman. Worked for Rainbow Bread Company.
Call him the bread man, huh?
Call him Bread Man.
Bread man, sugar butcher.
But I was engaged 5 or 6 times before that.
What happened?
After I got engaged, I decided I didn't want to get married. Wasn't the right one.
So then you just call it off?
Yeah.
Did you ever have dates set?
Before that?
Yeah.
No.
No?
And one guy I was engaged to.
Did you get a ring with everyone?
Yeah.
You give them all back?
I gave them all back except for one. I tried to keep it and he didn't have the sucker paid for. So I had to return it to the jewelry store because I didn't want to have to pay for it.
Oh, that's pretty funny.
And I was engaged to another guy, and he was going to Vietnam. And I didn't want to keep going with him, so I gave the ring back on the Ferris wheel. He threw it off the Ferris wheel.
Did he find it?
Connie Harms, a friend that was with us, knew I was going to do it, and she knew Bob would probably get upset, so she was watching. And she did find that ring in that crowd.
Really?
And he took me home that night and never said a word. He went to Vietnam, came back, Anyway, I married Terry Fay, and we had 2 wonderful boys, Daniel Vern and Andrew Frederick. And they were named right too, because Daniel Vern was named after Grandpa Fay, more or less, and he looks more like the Fays, and Andy was named after my dad, Frederick, and he looks more like the Challens. And,
looks like.
and we brought Dan home to a little house south of town, which is now the entrance to the golf course.
State Park, isn't it?
State Park. And there was a house there, a farm my folks owned. I just about got my foot cut off there at that farm. I was disking, and the disc got clogged up, and so Dad came over to clean it out, and he had a swinging drawbar on the back that he had welded on, and it came over, and I put my foot there because he said, hang on, and he backed up, and the swinging drawbar got my foot, my ankle. I've still got the scar down here.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, then Terry and I built a new home there on Cherokee in Shabna.
Mm-hmm.
Then we left there and we went to, bought a resort up in St. Germain, Wisconsin. And then we left there and came back to Shabna and bought a house north of the church on Hiawatha.
How old was I when we moved up there and came back?
We went in 76 and came back in 78.
Went up in 74, didn't you?
No.
I was 2.
No, you weren't.
When I came back, I was in kindergarten.
We went to 76.
Yeah.
We went up there in 76 and we came back in 78.
Huh. I was 6 when we came back. Okay.
And I had a beauty shop. Always had a beauty shop. And
Yeah, because you would have turned 6 that week before you went.
then in 70, no it's not, in 1987, Terry and I divorced in September. And then anyway, I remarried him in November, and then we got divorced again January 10th of 88.
February 29th.
Yeah, I left January 10th, and we got divorced February 29th. And went home and stayed with Mom for 7 or 8 months until we could rent Ott Schmidt's house. And when we moved in that day, it was just the boys and I, and it was like 103 degrees, and all the windows were painted shut. Oh, it was terrible. Dirty. And Ken let me rent it for like $150 a month. And I did a lot of work. Cleaned it up. New carpeting. Stripped the woodwork.
That was cheap, wasn't it? 150 a month?
150 was good. And at the time I was working at the restaurant, driving a bus, and cleaning houses. And working in the beauty shop. And then we had in 88, no, in January of 89, I was driving a bus, and I was busing the foreign exchange student from Spain out to the country. He had no way of getting to town. He lived with a woman that had 2 younger kids. Once he got there, he didn't have a way of getting anyplace else.
Yeah. Fernando?
Yeah, and his name was Fernando Mona.
Fernando Canada Mona.
And Andy knew him in school. So they conversed and decided he could come live with us. So I says, yeah, that's fine with me, but I don't cook. And he had to sleep in the attic with the rafters. But he was a super kid.
Yeah.
He could play the piano. He could listen to a tape of the Beach Boys and play it. And then the boys were going they would take a bunch of kids and go skiing out to Colorado. They started that year, didn't you?
Yeah, that's maybe the year before.
Yeah, might have been the year before. Anyway, that year a bunch of them were going to Colorado skiing, and the day that they were to leave, Bob Hill, who I was engaged to from 1964 to 1967, dated engaged to, and he was the one that went to Vietnam, came to see me. And he was married, but he had heard I was divorced. And so he came to see me, and I said, yeah, I'd like to go with him, but he had to get divorced first.
Mm-hmm.
So a few weeks later, he went and told his wife he wanted a divorce. And then Fernando was there, and then Bob came and lived with us in first part of April, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I had purchased or had ordered a brand new 1989 red Cavalier convertible, and Andy and Dan and Fernando just loved that car. They went downtown Chicago. They went all over the place.
It was a fun car.
Andy drove it most of the time.
Yeah.
And the boys went to graduate from high school, and Dan went to Southern for a year. Didn't go well, and then he went to Kish Junior College for a couple of years, but he never got a degree. And Andy went to Northern 3 years. I think he got a year left, maybe.
Yeah.
But he hasn't gotten his degree either.
Well, I've got a degree.
A
A 2-year degree.
Yeah, associate's degree. And Andy went into the service in the fall of 90, or 91.
90.
90. Right
June
after
12th.
June. Bob and I, Bob's a consultant, and at the time he was working for Reagan's Star Wars up in Sacramento, California. And they would pay for the wife to fly back and forth. So every other weekend, I flew out there to Sacramento, and every other weekend he came home. And the boys were on their own. And then we got married December 10th of 1989 up in the mountains of Lake Tahoe. We went in a horse and carriage, and we got married in the sweaters that he had bought for us in 1975 or 6 for Christmas presents. They were ski sweaters.
1965.
1965.
Not 75.
1965.
Yeah.
And then Andy went into the service. That's one of the reasons Andy didn't finish his last year. He was in the service, and in the latter part of August, what was that, maybe like the 18th or 20th?
We started in beginning of August.
The National Guard was called down to Mississippi.
The Mississippi flood of 1993.
Yeah, 1993, and Andy I think you thought you'd only be there maybe 3 weeks, but you were there about 3 months, weren't you?
It's a couple months. It went into school
Yeah, so he had
to where I couldn't take my classes.
So then he just never went back, but he's got a stick. Do you have that stick?
Yeah,
Do
I
I
do.
still have it? That you whittled?
I think
Mississippi flood of 1993.
I think you've got it.
I was gonna throw it on.
Yeah, it was on the Southern Ornament. Prairie to Rocher.
Yeah, but
Oh,
it
my
was,
red bud butter.
Yeah. Yep.
he called it the Mississippi flood,
Yeah.
Mississippi River
Yeah.
flood. And then it was in 1990, Bob and I bought a computer. And that's when I started learning the computer. Bob was very good at it,
Mhm.
and he was very patient with me. And then I worked at Northern FS part-time, and then in 1995, Andy got married and started working for Lowe's. And then in 1997, Dan got married. And all this time, my dad passed away in 1984. And Mom was just going downhill a little bit all the time. She still lived alone in the house there north of town. But then in 1995, Bob and I, no, it was earlier than that. 1992 or 1991 or 2, Bob and I bought Ott Schmidt's house. And then in 1996, we built the white garage. Bob and I did it too. We did all the cement work. I did the electrical. Yeah, Bob did all the framing, roof. Trish Greenwell and I did the siding. Tom Greenwell helped with some of it. He helped us with the driveway on Saturdays.
Uh-huh.
And I put the stonework up in front of the garage and used some of my dad's arrowheads and fossils that we found in Cold City with my dad. My mom and dad took us kids every place. When we were kids, we took a month vacation every summer because he was a farmer. We could do that. Month to 6 to 8 weeks, we'd be gone. Went all over the U.S. I was in every state except for Washington, or except for Hawaii and Alaska. Several times, every state.
Mm-hmm.
And just wish I could have done it for my kids. But don't have that much time off
No.
to be able to do that. It's the main reason. When you're a farmer, you have that time. And every Christmas, we spent 13 years, we spent Christmas in Arizona. They'd take us out, we'd be gone 3 weeks. School never said a thing. Because his brother, Uncle Chet, lived out there. My dad had 5 brothers. There was 5 boys. He had 4 brothers. It was, Preston was the oldest, and then Chet, and then Fred, who was my father, and then Bob, and then Uncle Pat. And there was 2 to 2.5 years between the first 4, and then Uncle Chet was about 5 years later, or Uncle Pat. They're all dead and gone now, except for Uncle Bob. He's still living.
Was he like 87?
Yeah, he's about 87. My dad was 72 when he passed away, and my mom was 83. But Mom came and lived with Bob and I for 9 months. And it was the best thing I ever did. Because I have no guilt feelings about what I did for my parents. I loved them and I did for them. And I helped them every chance I could. Bob and I were the top niggas up there. Because we went and did everything for Mom. Anything she needed done, we did it. And then when she lived with us for those 9 months, Bob had started, I was working at Lowe's. I was manager of kitchen cabinets at Lowe's. And he had finished the project, so he started building the garage in April. I think Dan and Bob cut down the tree in April, that big evergreen. And then
I helped out with that.
Huh? You helped with that too?
I remember doing that.
Andy helped with it too. And he got all the framing up, and it was all built. Still had to do some electrical in it, and the drywall, and some of the siding maybe. And he had a project, so he had to go do that. Mom got sick, and Doc Purdy didn't want her to go back home and live by herself. So she said she would pay me what I made at Lowe's if I would come and take care of her. And it worked out pretty good, because then she came and lived with us. Her bedroom was right there looking out over that garage.
Yeah.
And I could work on the garage, and she could talk to me through the windows. And so then she died in May of May 27th,
97.
1997. And Dan had met Christina and got married August 1st of 1997.
August 2nd.
August 2nd. And then as soon as they were married, Bob and I took off for a 3-week trip to Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. We went all the way up to Red Bay, Labrador, and came back. And
It's a long drive.
it was 6,500 miles,
One way or round trip?
round trip. Bought the 1997 Tahoe and put 6,700 miles on it. Andy married Lisa Hollingshead December 16th of 1995.
Yeah.
And they now have a beautiful little daughter, Stella Adair, who the Adair is after me, Joy Adair.
I should probe you because she looks like a challenge.
It's
Where my father got the Adair. Dad named all of us kids. Gail and Dan was from a radio station way back when.
What was Dan's middle name?
Daniel Owen and Gail Ann. But Dan and Gail were on a radio station
Oh, yeah?
that Dad used to listen to. And the Adair, he always said that it was like Red Adair. He was the oil firefighters, and he was the one that put out all the Kuwait
Oil fire?
oil fires.
Really?
And he always liked the name Adair.
I never knew that. That
The
it
only
came
other
from
place,
There's a bar in Texas called Adair's.
there's a bar, but the only other place I heard of an Adair was an Adair Music House, and it was in the South when I worked at Wurlitzer.
Oh, yeah?
And it was spelled the same, Adair.
Was there
They called me Smiley in school because I always smiled. Some of them still call me Smiley.
Grade school or high school? Or?
All through school.
Huh.
High school was mainly, they called me Smiley, was my nickname.
I thought it was Leadfoot Lily.
Well, that's when I got out of school. Leadfoot Will. My dad called me Squeak. I called him Squawk. Every time we left or came home, he'd say, "Hi, Squawk." I'd say, "Hi, Squeak."
You mean the other way around?
Yeah. He'd say, "Hi, Squeak." I'd say, "Hi, Squawk." Dad was always a prankster. Andy took after him in that way too, in a way, because he'd hide cookies at Christmas or do little things like that. Do you remember doing that?
Jack up the back of a car so someone wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to
my
leave.
dad, he was always jacking up the back end of my friends' cars.
I used to do that in high school to Jimmy Deutsch all the time.
You did that too?
My girlfriend bought a brand new little Carmen Ghia. That was about 1960s sometime. And she brought it over to show me. She came in the house and was talking to me, and Dad went out the back door and he went and got his jack, went around, jacked it up there on the South Drive. So before we went to go for a ride, and we got in her car and she puts it in reverse and it didn't move. She says, "Joy, what's wrong with my car?"
You knew, didn't you?
Dad was in the house and he had go like that. He laughed like Precious Pup. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
He was a silversmith, he'd make jewelry. He was a jack of all trades, a master of none, he always said. And that's what people in town say about me now. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, because I can do just about anything. Put my mind to, just like my dad. And just last year I took silversmithing and jewelry making up at Kish, because I got his lapidary equipment. And now I work for B.B. Hess in DeKalb.
What do they make?
It's a printing company. They make paperback books like your Consumer Report, they make a lot of the school workbooks that kids work out of during the year. And when I first got there, Gene Fogel hired me. He's my boss. And it didn't take him long to know that I knew the computer, so then he wanted me to start training him plus all of his supervisors. And so I put together a manual and I started training August 7th of 2000. And right now, Dan and I came down to see Stella. It's Labor Day. And I'm ready to go back home and see my hubby because he didn't come. He hadn't worked for a year. And he's been on the internet. He must have sent out 150 resumes. But he finally got a job 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he works for Connector Services Corporation now out of Chicago.
You have any funny stories about Lisa's dad, or Stella's dad, when he grew up? About me?
Well, Andy was a smart little kid. When we brought him home from the hospital, he was strong. And he was lifting his head up and sitting up in no time. He walked early. He got his teeth early.
How old was I when I walked?
Well, I think Dan was like 10 months and Andy was 9 months.
When I started walking?
Yes, by yourself.
Wow.
You were sitting up at 3 months. You were so strong. Now, both of you were strong. You were half grown practically when you were born, but you're strong kids. And my mother watched Dan when I was when I did hair, because I had my shop there, and she said he could hear my car when I turned the corner off the highway. He just knew it was me.
Really?
But with you were so alert that you just knew everything that was going on. And it reminds me of Stella, because you just took in everything.
She's pretty alert.
Yeah, but you did too. See, you took in everything.
Yeah.
And it was just like you knew what was going on around you.
She's a strong little booger too.
And
Little booger.
one of the kids, and I can't remember which one it was, one of them said Valana.
That was me.
That was Dan maybe. And
And
the
he
other
said
one said
piano.
piano.
Andy.
And
And nobody could get aluminum right.
Andy took the piano in school, and he played the drums, very good at it. And had a nice drum set, and he made a beautiful picture of his drum set. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Drew it.
Took me hours to draw that thing.
Yeah, but we never did get
Mr. Lombardo
it got away from us someplace.
disappeared.
And he, it still upsets you, doesn't it?
Just thinking about it still upsets me.
Yeah.
I don't have the drum set anymore. I sold it, and I think I spent 60 hours on that drawing.
Yeah. It was a beautiful job. And it was on a piece of
Heavy
paper,
cardboard.
heavy cardboard that was 4x4 or 3x4.
It was 3 foot by 4 foot,
Yeah.
and it was on display at the art exhibition at the high school.
Yeah, and you got
And after it was, I got ribbons for it. And after it was over, nobody knew where it was.
Yeah, but both of the boys were very good in math. Their grandma Fay got them this little professor, And every time we went in the car or went on vacation, you guys played with that. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
And I wonder to this day if that helped you in math.
I think it has a lot to do with it.
Because you started that when she gave them to you, and I thought, you're not going to play with this. You know, you were like 3 years old, 4 years old. But you did. And you played with them a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, what else? He learned hot, when he was about 2. He'd go around, hot. As soon as he got a little bit close to it and it was a little warm, he'd hot. And when he got into school, Sherry Martin, when I went down to one of the
Parent-teacher conferences?
parent-teacher conferences, she said, Joy, you have an amazing child here. Because she said he's not a bookworm. He gets along with all of his peers. He plays sports. He was athletic and everything. A very well-rounded boy, but very smart. And he's proven it. He's a go-getter. And anything that he does. Both the boys, I think, Dan probably got like a 27 or 28 on your ACT.
25.
25? And you got a 30.
No, 24. 23.
No.
His was lower than mine.
24 overall.
But, okay, then it was your math and science that you guys rated so high.
I got a 33 in math and a 31 on science.
Yeah.
Then I
Okay. That's what it was
did
then.
horrible on English.
Yeah, I got like a 17 or 18 on English.
But the national average on that is 19.
18.
18.
That's it.
So when you get a 30, 31 in math and science, that's pretty darn good, I think.
Yeah.
And what else?
Yeah.
Andy started working for Jim Smalley in the summers when he was 15, I think.
15. Yep, I couldn't drive. He'd pick me up every
Yep.
morning.
And he'd pick him up every morning and bring him back home for lunch.
And every Christmas he'd give me
A
case of pop.
because he called him the Coca-Cola Kid.
I drink 6 cans a day.
Because he always had Coke with him. But Jim Smalley taught Andy a lot.
Oh yeah. I'm still reaping benefits of that experience.
And even when we moved back to town from Wisconsin, what?
I still gotta go, you know.
We decided to dig a swimming pool. And we needed electric hookup to it. So Andy, fifth, sixth grade, he goes out the garage. He did all the electrical wiring, never asked. I think he might have asked Jim a few questions.
Yeah.
Jim told him how to do it. And he wired the garage and they put up ceiling fans for me. But it was just like me, really, because when we moved into that house, there was a brand new shower door, sliding shower door, sitting in a box. And there needed to be a shower door in our bathroom. So I asked my dad how I did it. How would you do that? So Dad told me. And I asked him up at the restaurant one morning, talking to him, having coffee, because I always go to the restaurant every morning.
Yeah.
Now I go at 5:30. But anyway, so then Dad called about 11 o'clock and he says, be careful when you drill into that ceramic tile so you don't crack it. And I said, Dad, it's up. He says, it's up? I got to come over and see it. So he came over and he said, a perfect job. I didn't crack it or anything. Anyway, is that enough?
Yeah, that's enough. We'll stop it there.
I've talked enough. Don't get me talking about my boys because I can talk all day.
Almost out of tape, but that's good. I think that's really good stuff. We'll see you later. Thanks for coming down.
Bye.
Bye.
Love ya.